Are you losing a lot? Winning in Fortnite can be a little tricky sometimes, and there are a ton of reasons why a game may not go your way. It could be that you're making huge mistakes, or maybe it's just bad luck. But honestly, no one is really that unlucky all the time. So let's begin. What's up everyone, my name is Lethal, and in today's video I'm going to show you how you can win more fights in Fortnite. By the way, if you enjoy this topic, please leave a like and subscribe for more content. So I have 5 tips for you. Starting off with number 1, pick your fights. There are good fights to take and there are bad fights. In a fair fight, you will have to out-aim and outsmart your opponent, but a better fight is one where you have the advantage. A good advantage could be having more health than the enemy player. When a player has low health, they play much less aggressively. So if a player you're approaching has just finished a fight, they may be healing. Or if you see someone drinking minis or putting on a medkit, they're definitely low. But the best way to know for sure is if you deal the damage yourself. On the other hand, if you're the one that's low on health, you're going to have to play much more carefully and defensively. Attack rebooting enemies. Another advantage you can have is when you hear a reboot van going off nearby. If you get to it fast enough, you could stop the enemy team from rebooting. But even if they do get it off, their teammates only spawn in with a gray pistol. Also, listen carefully for how many players are being rebooted so you know what you're getting yourself into. Fighting against high ground. If an enemy starts shooting at you from high ground and you don't have any cover, this is a bad situation and one you should avoid whenever you can. In build mode, you can probably hold your own, but in zero builds, it's usually a lot more complicated. If you're pretty good with a sniper or a DMR, you can potentially deal some damage and then push while they're healing. But if you're taking a lot of damage, especially if they surprise you, leaving is probably your best bet. Long distance fighting. Another example of a bad fight is when you're engaging enemies at a distance that have long range weapons when you don't, especially if they also have the high ground. If you're being sniped at or spammed with DMRs, it's extremely risky to try beaming them with a regular AR. The best way to solve this is to carry long range weapons, but sometimes you just won't have them, so if you end up in a mismatch like this, leaving might be a good option. But if you can't leave, or if you notice they're just missing their shots, try and close the distance to give yourself a fair fight. Getting third partied. Finally, you may end up in a situation where you start getting shot at by multiple teams at the same time. I know I keep saying to leave or to disengage, but it's better to live to see another fight than to be back at the lobby. When you're getting pinched between two teams, just get out of there if possible. Instead, you want to be the one doing the pinching, so if you catch two teams fighting, attack them while they're distracted. This is called third partying, and it definitely sucks when other teams are third partying you. The best way to avoid this is to finish out your fights very quickly. The longer a fight drags on, the more attention it will attract, so try to be as quick as possible without getting sloppy or reckless. Number 2, move and shoot. If you don't get hit, you can't get knocked. Simple as that. In a fight, the way you move actually matters a lot. Here are some helpful movement tips. Don't stand still. Standing perfectly still is obviously a bad idea. You might get away with it a few times, but it will eventually catch up to you and you'll end up getting sniped or something. When you're in a fight, the goal is to deal damage but also to avoid taking damage at the same time. So keep moving. Try to imagine that you're always being aimed at. That way when you do get shot at, the first shots will most likely miss. Strafing. The most simple movement you can do is just to strafe side to side. Try to move randomly instead of having any sort of rhythm. Also keep in mind that you'll have to adjust your aim from side to side as well while you're moving. This sort of movement is perfect for when you're sniping or using an assault rifle, and even with SMGs in close quarters. When done right, it will make you unpredictable and very difficult to hit. Jumping. Now at close range with shotguns, you have a lot more freedom to move how you want. This is because you only need to be on target for the split second that you're shooting your shot. So in a typical shotgun fight, you can jump a lot. It does make it much harder to hit your shots, but like I said, you're much harder to hit as well, and that's really the point. Dodging. If you're getting shot at, a good way to avoid being hit is to tactical sprint and use sliding and slide jumping in order to get away, or to move behind cover. You also don't ever want to run away in a straight line. Instead, you want to move left to right to make the enemy miss their shots. This includes strafing side to side while shooting and abusing the crouching mechanic to avoid getting shot in the head by snipers. It can be really difficult and a little frustrating to hit a moving target, so this is the kind of target you want to be. Number 3, make good decisions. There's so many decisions, both good and bad, that can affect your game. I've said this before, but the choices you make can cause you to win or lose. Obviously, in the game that you end up winning, there were a series of good choices that worked out for you in the end. So in your games, really think about the things that you're doing. Remember how you died and try not to make the same mistake over and over again. But also remember the good things that did work and keep doing them. This is how you build a skill set, and the skills you develop will turn you into a well-rounded player. Think ahead. You may not need a certain item at the moment, but you never know when it will come in handy in the future. The easiest thing you can count on needing are health items, so always carry at least one item that you can heal with. And consider that you may not always have the time to use certain things like shield kegs, for instance, or med kits. So if you can, try carrying faster healing items like minis, chug splashes, or slurpfish and floppers. These are items that you can actually use in the middle of a fight if you have the right cover. Use the right weapons. When picking weapons, think about the different kinds of fights you will be in. Eventually you will end up in close quarters with enemies, so having a shotgun is an easy choice. You can then think about adding an SMG so you'll have something to switch to in between shots, but this is optional. Next, you're going to want to have some range, so definitely carry an AR. And for the really long range fights, a scoped weapon like a DMR or sniper is perfect for the job. Lastly, having explosives like a goo gun is a good item to break down cover and to stop an enemy from healing or reviving. If you have other teammates that are pushing in the fight, the goo gun is good for keeping pressure on the enemy. Be aggressive. The best way to learn is by taking action. When you hear or see fights going on around you, join in. Some players like to hide out all game, but this is not the move. Sure, you might die a few times, but the more you fight, the better you will become. So don't be scared to get in there and get your hands dirty. An aggressive playstyle is going to give you a lot of confidence when approaching enemies to fight. You can only get this way by making it a habit. Weigh the consequences. Know that as soon as you start firing shots, you've lost the element of surprise. So try to consider the consequences before doing anything and decide if it's worth it or not. Waiting for the perfect opportunity and then taking a shot can be so much more rewarding than shooting right away. Number 4. Use cover. Using cover is going to be your number one way to avoid taking damage in any fight. Wherever you decide to move on the map, make sure you always have some form of cover available, even if it's just the slope of a hill or a few trees or rocks. You can also carry items like cow catchers, porta bunkers, and shield bubbles to use as deployable cover when you need it. Right hand peek. The best way to use cover is to make sure you have a right hand peek whenever you can. The third person camera angle in Fortnite makes right hand peeks overpowered. I've talked about this before in a previous video, but basically if you move around the left side of cover, you won't be able to see until your whole body is exposed. Try and avoid this at all times. And if you see an enemy that has a right hand peek, try and force them from behind cover or just find a better angle. Move between cover. Now when using cover, keep in mind that things like trees and rocks will eventually break from being shot at, so have a backup plan so that you have somewhere to go when that piece of cover is destroyed. You also don't want to repeatedly peek from behind the same piece of cover too many times. Doing this makes you predictable, and any decent player will simply aim at the spot you peeked from before and shoot you as soon as you pop out again. Breakable trees and boulders. Try to avoid using breakable trees or runaway boulders as cover because this is the best way to get smacked. A lot of players are going to be in the moment and focused on shooting or whatever else they're doing at the time. Because of this lack of attention, they often fall victim to unnecessary damage. So don't be that kind of player. Avoid tunnel vision and keep an eye on what's around you that can be used against you or that you can use against the enemy. Bushes. Unlike other forms of cover, you can shoot through a bush without breaking it. But if you pickaxe the bush a few times or it gets ran over by a car or hit by explosives, it will break. If you stand near the edge of a bush and aim down sights, you can see through the leaves. But be careful not to move too far to the edge because you can be seen easily. Ultimately, using bushes is a good way to surprise teams that are passing by. They're also good if you need somewhere to heal, revive a teammate, or wait while the circle closes. Number 5, improve your aim. Your aim is going to play the biggest part in whether you're winning or not. The more you can hit your shots, the better your games will go. So if your aim isn't good, you need to consider either practicing or possibly lowering your sensitivity. Lower sensitivity is going to give you more fine control of your aim at a distance. It also will make tracking opponents a lot easier. A good low sense for controller is 4 or 40% in the advanced settings. A good aim down sight sense is 10% or lower. If you already have a pretty low sensitivity, there's probably no use in lowering it anymore, because this could ruin your normal turning speed. Hipfire versus aiming down sights. Depending on the distance that your target is, you may either want to hipfire for very close range or aim down sights for medium to long range. Hipfiring is simply shooting without holding down your left trigger on the controller. Aiming down sights for controller is when you hold down left trigger. Knowing when to hipfire and when to aim down sights is very important. For example, you definitely don't want to hipfire at long range, because hipfire is not very accurate at that distance. On the other hand, if an enemy is very close to you, it may be hard to keep track of them if you aim down sights because they will be jumping and running around. Sometimes though, it can benefit you to aim down sights in close quarters. If an enemy isn't moving very much, aiming down sights will give you more accuracy and definitely more damage with shotguns, but most of the time they will start moving and jumping around when you start shooting. Locking on versus tracking. Two basic things you'll be doing with your aim are locking on and tracking. Locking on is simple. It just means placing your sights on your target, preferably before you shoot. The best way to lock onto a target is to move your sights as close to your target as possible while aiming from the hip, and then aim down sights and make the final fine adjustment. The closer you can get your sights to your target before aiming down sights, the better. Locking on while hip firing can be a little more difficult, especially because your normal sensitivity is a lot higher than your aim down sight sense, but again, this is why you only hip fire in close quarters. Now tracking is when you keep your crosshair on your target while it moves. Tracking can be done while aiming down sights and also when hip firing. It can also be done at any distance. Tracking is mainly for fully automatic weapons like ARs and SMGs, and even burst weapons or semi-auto weapons with a decent fire rate. To track a target, you'll first need to lock onto it. Then simply follow the movement of your target while you're shooting. It's a lot easier said than done. So that's going to wrap it up for now. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions or suggestions, comment down below. Also, my DMs are always open, so feel free to message me on Instagram or Twitter. Hope you have a great day, and we'll see you next time.